No axle is tougher on the rocks than rocks. Today on Xtreme 4x4, the bottom drawer buggy gets Rockwells front and rear, plus pinion brakes, transfer case gearing, and more.
And you'll get to find out what caused this.
Damn, cuz.
Hey everybody, welcome to Xtreme 4x4. Surely you remember our bottom drawer buggy that we built earlier this year. Well, today it's back for its much needed axle upgrade. Now the idea for this project started when we realized that we had enough used parts laying around our shop to put together an entire four-wheel steer buggy drivetrain. So we grabbed just over 100 feet of tubing and bent up a super small two-seater chassis. Dropped in a rebuilt 350 left over from the Suburban Gorilla, and topped it with a GOT propane fuel delivery system. Swapped the output shaft in the Turbo 400 and bolted up a Dana 300 transfer case. Then with a 4-link kit from Blue Torch Fab and some Fox air shocks, we had a rolling four-wheel steer chassis sitting on some 46-inch Mickey Thompson Baja claws mounted on steel bead locks. Then we headed out on the trail to see how it all worked. And with a grand total of $7,983 spent, it turned out great. We always knew that we had two weak links in our drivetrain, and that being the axles themselves, especially this front 10 bolt. It's basically a half-ton axle. It's got very small axle shafts and very small axle joints out on the stub shafts. These were certainly not meant to handle 46-inch tall tires and definitely not off-road. But for this buggy, we got something special. Now these are 2.5-ton top-loading Rockwell axles, often referred to as rocks. And today we're going to tear into these things from one end to the other and then install them underneath our bottom drawer buggy. To say that these things are indestructible is an understatement. But to really understand the mystery of this top double reduction housing, you have to have a look inside. To obtain a 6.72 to 1 gear ratio, the Rockwell uses a double reduction gear set. The first part of the gear set is a typical ring and pinion, with 9 teeth on the pinion and 22 on the ring. This gives us a 2.44 to 1 initial reduction. The power is then transferred from the ring gear to a separate smaller spur gear that then drives the larger bull gear. Inside the bull gear, you'll find the side gears that are splined onto the 1.62-inch 16-spline axles, as well as the spider gears that allow those axles to travel at different speeds while cornering. The cool thing about the top-loading Rockwell is that we can turn the reduction housing 180 degrees to center the drive shaft input so we can install it into the rear of the buggy. Now if you remember, we kept track of all the money it took to build our bottom drawer buggy, and we're going to do the same today. So far, we spent $1,500 on 2 steering 2.5-ton Rockwells. Now before we start anything today, we're going to tear these all apart. Ground clearance can be an issue with the Rockwell because it's got this huge sump on the bottom side to store all the gear oil to keep the gears cool. But because we're running on the trail, we don't need this much fluid. So we're going to go ahead and shave this Rockwell up. Measuring up 1 inch from the factory weld, we mark 2 half circles and continue up the middle to make room for the bull gear. Then we cut and grind. With both housings prepped, we'll use 1/4-inch plate to rebuild the bottom section. Now before final welding, drop the center section back in to check for clearance. Then we can burn it in for good. Now inside the bull gear, you'll find the spider assembly. Now the spider gears are what allows the axles to turn different speeds when you go around a corner by basically walking around the side gears. Now we don't want that. We want this axle locked up. So we're going to go ahead and weld this assembly so the axle is full lock all the time, kind of like a spool. Now you can buy a locker for the Rockwell axle. There's a couple different models. The cheapest one is around 500 bucks. But if you remember, we're watching our wallet here, so we're going to spend at least that we can. This is the cheapest way. Now later on, if we want to put a locker in here, we'd have to take the spider assembly out and replace it. So either way, we're ahead of the game. I need a welder. With the side gear and half of the housing, we'll drop the cross and spiders back in and tack them together. Then flip them over and tack weld the opposite side. Then all we have to do is add the other side gear, make sure it all still fits in the carrier, pull it out, and weld it solid. Afterwards, put it all back together and reinstall it into the reduction housing. One of the issues that always comes up with the Rockwell axle is the brakes. Now if you remember, we pulled off this monster brake drum when we tore our axle apart. We don't want to reuse that because the drum brake is just going to fill up with water and mud when we're out in the trail, and most rims aren't even going to fit around that thing. Now there are companies that make disc brake conversions for the Rockwell, and if this was going on a street truck, that would be a must. But because this is just going in our fun buggy, we can do what's called a pinion brake. Now the Rockwell housing has two inputs, so by using a rotor from the local parts store and a typical brake caliper, we can go ahead and brake the axle before it goes into the reduction housing. Now this may look small, but we're going to be braking this thing before the gear reduction. It's going to give us a 7-to-1 advantage over our tires. So when you hit that brake pedal, it's almost going to throw you through the windshield. We grabbed a ton of brake rotors from our local parts stores and found that a 95 Mercury rotor fit inside our drive flange. Now we'll make a pattern on some cardboard, trace it onto some plate to make a bracket for our new caliper. Now we went with this Toyota caliper because it's a fixed unit. It's got pistons on both sides of the rotor, so it's easier to mount. It can be fixed to this bracket with just a couple of bolts. And then after the brake, we're going to go ahead and put these axles underneath the buggy.
Later on, the Bottom Drawer Buggy leaves the shop for one of our most outrageous payoffs yet.
Welcome back to Xtreme 4x4. Now that we have our Rockwells ready to go underneath our buggy, we can pull out this old Dana 50 that was in the rear and the 10-bolt that we stuffed up front. And now all we have to do is modify our 4-link to fit our new 2.5 tons. With the axle housing in place, we can build a new removable truss system for the upper links. Then the tabs are welded and the links bolted up, followed by some new shock tabs. Now we could have left the master cylinder that's in our buggy alone and it would control our pinion brakes, wouldn't be an issue. But we did this in one of our other projects and it turned out really nice. We're going to install 2 pedal assemblies and master cylinders that we got from Summit Racing right beside each other. That way we'll be able to use them together to control brakes front and rear, or we can brake the front axle or the rear axle independent of each other. And since we're running with a front welded diff, we're going to be doing a lot of front digs. This will make it a lot easier. Now with the brakes taken care of, we can deal with something that we consider a little more serious, and that's our crawl ratio. Now our Turbo 400 has a 2.5-to-1 first gear ratio, and the Dana 300 in stock form has a 2-to-1 low range. That gives us about a 5-to-1 at the output shaft. If you do the math on our 6.72 Rockwells, you end up with a crawl ratio of about 33-to-1. That's not bad, but we got 46-inch tall tires. We got to change that. So we're going to install a TerraFlex 4-to-1 low gear kit as well as their heavy-duty output shaft. Now what that's going to do is basically double the low-range gearing in the transfer case and double it at the output shaft. That, of course, will double our crawl ratio, taking it up to about 66-to-1. That's a little bit more respectable off-road. This really is no harder than rebuilding a stock transfer case. Once you have the case completely stripped down, replace the gears that are pressed onto the input and output shaft. You will need to clearance the inspection cover in order for the new idler gear to fit into the case. Then replace the output housing with the new piece designed to clear the larger output shaft. Reinstall the front bearing retainer and shift tower assembly. Then the case is ready to go back into our buggy. Back on Xtreme 4x4, and our bottom drawer buggy is just about ready to hit the trail. So far today, we've swapped out these weak link axles, the Dana 50 that was in the back and the 10 bolt up front, for these monster 2.5-ton Rockwells. We built a low-dollar pinion brake to control them and adapted our 4-link to fit and put a 4-to-1 gear set into our transfer case. Now all we got to do is get it on some tires and wheels. Now the problem is our wheels will not bolt up to our Rockwell hub. This bolt pattern is very distinctive and obviously only a 6-lug, but for that we have a solution. Now recentering a set of steel wheels is not a new idea. Guys do it to Hummer H1 beadlocks they buy used all the time. But we already have a good set of steel beadlocks on our buggy. So we called up the guys at Copperhead Fab and they made us a custom set of wheel centers to fit, and then they even cut our logo in it just for fun. So all we got to do now is cut the old wheel center out and weld in this new one. With the tires off the rims, we'll cut out the old centers. Woo-wee. Grind the inside of the rim smooth, and our new pieces can be tacked into place after the back spacing is checked. Now, pretty much everything on the Rockwell can be turned around and used the other way. That's how they're designed. And that goes for the wheel hub as well. If you remember, stock, it holds the brake drum to the back side and goes on like this. But since you got to pull the studs out to remove the drum, if you want to save some width, you can actually install this hub backwards. Now if you do this, change the wheel bearings front and back as well, because they will be worn into the race. Now since we're not worried about width, we're going to go ahead and run it in the stock location. And then all we have to do is cut our other 3 rims up, weld in the new centers, check the back spacing. This thing's ready for the trail.
And that's exactly where we'll take you after the break. Stay tuned.
We're back on Xtreme 4x4. We pulled Tommy out of the tech center to ride shotgun, and we're about to take Bottom Drawer Buggy version 2.0 into the trails. Now the last time we took this thing out, we had 2 weak links. Those would be our axles. Now with 2.5-ton Rockwells front and rear, we know that we can feed this thing some serious trails and we won't have to worry. So we're heading into a nice deep trench that always rolls one of our buggies over, but it's okay because it rolls it over on Tommy's side. The extra width really pays off in a trench like that. It is a little wide to fit through the trees, but with a 4-wheel steer, you can sort of pick your line. It keeps you a lot more level. Now we'll go somewhere and really twist this thing up. 46-inch tall tires are truly a commitment. You give up a lot of gearing to get that extra ground clearance. But thanks to our 7-to-1 Rockwell ratios, gadunk, and the 4-to-1 Terralo gears in the case, we're able to get some of that low-speed crawl back. Another potent modification felt on the trail, no, didn't come from this empty beer can, it's right here, the shaved Rockwell. It takes a ton of work to get a Rockwell into your rig. Don't go halfway, shave the bottom. If you don't, you're gonna get hung up on every other rock. There we go. Oh, damn! This hill is considered a serious trail because halfway up, you gotta bounce over some serious rocks that have a tendency to put your rig on its lid. Picking the right line when rock crawling is just as important as getting on the gas when needed. Every now and then, it's more important to stop at the right time. And it's surprising how well the pinion brakes will hold. Hold on. About 11 grand in this thing. Costs us just over 2,500 bucks swapping these axles. But being able to do something like this without worrying about breaking an axle, oh, well worth the money. Hold on. That's Rockwells for you, baby! Ow! Now this buggy was not built to be a mud bog truck. Here we go! But Rockwells can handle just about anything, and the true test of that is full throttle, deep, sticky mud. Oh, coolant! Damn, that was hot. Damn, we almost made it. We're about 2 feet from making it. You gotta admit, only a Rockwell can handle getting fed the throttle for like 10 minutes. I really think we should have put a roof on the buggy. I feel like an iced donut. Check it out here. Oh, I almost got you. Ooh, I almost fell. I would have got dirty.